Thank you so very much for coming. We're really, really excited to talk with you today and about planning out your communication strategy with SharePoint News and Viva Amplify. If I haven't met you before, hello. I'm really, really excited to have a group of amazing people, I can tell already, not only because you came at 8 a.m., but because you're interested in communications strategy. And this is an awesome topic and very close to my heart, so I'm really excited to be able to talk with you. My name is Naomi Moneypenny. I lead the product directions for Viva Amplify and a few other things in the SharePoint land. I obviously work at Microsoft over in the mothership in Redmond, Washington. And so absolutely delighted to be in Orlando with the sunshine, which is an amazing thing, right? For all the folks who came from cold climes as well. So I'm like, this is the best place to be. Over here, we've got Dave. You want to introduce yourself?
Hi, everyone. I'm Dave Kahn. I'm a group product manager in the SharePoint Experiences team, and I lead product for SharePoint Sites, Pages, and SharePoint News. I'm excited to be here. I used to come here as a kid all the time, so being here for work is like really unique and special for me. So thank you for being a part of my very special moment.
Awesome. Manika.
Okay, good morning. Hello. My name is Manika Graywall. I'm a product manager on Viva Amplify. So excited to be here with you all. And I'm not coming all the way quite from Washington, but from California, Bay Area. Anyone? Mm-hmm. San Francisco?
Anybody?
No?
Yes.
Okay, well, we're all in Orlando together. That's what matters.
That's all good. That's all good. The West Coast is still in bed, I think, is part of the reason. 5 a.m. that time. It's all good. All right, we have a jam-packed session for you today. So we're going to go through a few different things. Talk about that corporate communications landscape. We're going to talk about your corporate communications strategy. I tend to be a little bit future-leaning, as anybody's come to a session before, but I like to talk about what the future's going to look like a little bit, so we're going to discuss some of those areas too. And then we're going to get into it with Viva Amplify and all the great capabilities we have with SharePoint News, and then just finish off on some kind of future thinking around all of this. Does that sound good to you? Yes? All right, good. Just checking. All right, to go through this. And if I'm talking too fast, let me know, because there's not that many folks in this room, and I actually like that interaction, and it's good. So please let me know if I'm talking too quickly or going through a lot of content. It's a lot of goodness here. So first off, let's go with the challenges. It's always important, right, to make sure that we understand some of those challenges that are being faced as a corporate communicator as well. And so even if you're in IT, but give me your hand up if you are in IT. I would love to see how many folks. Okay, all right. So we're going to talk about some of those communication strategy issues as well, and then we'll think about how IT is going to be that key enabler and key partner to help with this too. So we look around a couple of different things. There's a couple of big challenges we always see, right, inside of your organization with corporate communications. We want to make sure that folks are actually seeing all of the content that they've received. You spend all this time planning out all of your amazing messages and all your emails and everything else, and you're like, are people actually reading all this content in the end of it? And then, of course, when we do see these messages, like, are they actually reading the things that are coming out from our leaders? So oftentimes our executives are sending out lots of good communications. Their chief of staff is working with them to make sure that those messages are out there. And then people are like, wait, I didn't see the mail from the vice president. I didn't see this mail. Oh, that was announced 3 months ago or something. And people are just realizing, right? When it's just-in-time communications, oftentimes they don't realize that that information is there as well. And then, of course, communicators are being expanded in their role. And so this is something I see a lot of. And so all of you that are in IT as well are going to help with that. This is one of those areas where communicators are being change agents inside of the organization. And so what does that mean? That whole area around communications is actually expanding. You're being asked to do more with digital literacy, being asked to do more around transformation, around well-being, actually being change agents inside of the organization too. And I know that IT feels this as well. Yes? Yes, just checking, right? Good, all right, making sure. And then I want to make sure the other pieces here are like, how do we actually improve those communications to help you drive the engagement that you need? Because there's so many different ways to communicate with people, right? So we've got, all the classics, if you will, from an email perspective. I can send out my newsletters. I can post them out on my intranet. I have amazing capabilities with Viva Engage to be able to do social communities and make sure that folks can actually interact with each other as part of it. And then, of course, I want to be able to use things like Teams, and I've got announcements and channels and chats and all of this goodness. And so there's a lot of different ways to be able to reach people inside of your organization. And oftentimes it's stumping, right, of like, which ones should I use? Which ones really matter? Which ones do I really care about? And so we'll talk a little bit about that too. And then a couple of other areas here, right? We want to think about how you help to manage and scale those communications. Because if there's one thing we know that's certain, right, things keep getting smaller, right? Whether it's the size of your organization, your role keeps getting bigger, but oftentimes the amount of people available to do the work keeps getting smaller. And so that's one of the big areas for us. So we have to think about how do we help you to scale as a professional communicator too. And so whether you're in that IT role and you're actually sending out lots of communications about here's all the stuff that's coming, here's all these new tools and technologies inside of the organization, on top of all of the internal comms that we have too. And then, of course, I had to say it. Hey, I got to the bottom of the end of the first slide before I said AI and Copilot and all of those words. So, hey, it's only, let's see, it's 7 minutes in. I got 7 minutes in, folks. That's your line before I mention AI. But you know, being at this conference, being in this climate that we're in, being in this tech industry that we're in, you being able to see, of course, AI is helping us and revolutionizing everything that we're doing. But I think it's really important to make sure that we understand that AI is there to help scale what people do. Right? I'm going to say it again. AI is there to help people scale what they do. And so we want to think about, it's not AI is somehow magically doing my job for me or anything else. It's really about how do we think about scaling that creativity, scaling the work that's happening inside of your organization. So lots and lots of goodness as part of that too. All right, let's talk about what kind of communicator you are. So, first off, anybody, actual corporate communications, you do this professionally, all right. Pink folders over here, I'm gonna call you pink folders now, that's all good, thank you. And these folks over here are cornered together, okay, and a couple of other folks here mixed in. Awesome, awesome, wonderful, thank you so much. So those folks, right, you're like, I have to scale across all these communications. I'm trying to figure out how I craft all these communications inside of my organization. People are coming to me with hot things that they need as news. They don't understand my discipline, maybe understanding inside of the organization why it's important, and then thinking through like how we can actually craft those messages too. And then, of course, we've got our business leaders. We have any business leaders or chief of staff or your admin is having to craft a lot of these. Okay, a few folks in here too. So this is another big area for us. So this is understanding those needs are very different. There you're really trying to foster that two-way engagement with your employees. And so you as a business leader, you're challenged with like, how do I actually scale what I need to do? How do I get my message? How do I feel like I'm connected with the people in my organization? And so this is oftentimes a big challenge for us, right? Because we've got folks that are trying to help us, but you as a business leader, it's not like you went to school for communications. You may not be happy with writing things, right? So it's one of those areas where oftentimes we have to learn new skill sets too. We've got vertical communications in here. We've got folks like facilities and services. You still need to get your message out and make sure that those areas are being covered. Just lots of goodness as part of this too. And then, of course, we've got communication creators. Who is a communication creator here? I want to see every single hand up because I can't believe that you're all not going to write a trip report or something out of this conference, right? So we are all communication creators. And that is actually inside of your organization, the vast majority of people are actually going to create comms at some point in their lives. And so this is kind of an interesting space, right? Because you as a communications professional, you as an executive, you as IT, you're going to help those people to communicate out their message as well. And so this is a big area for sort of understanding how you can scale, thinking about what your scenario needs as part of this too, and then, you know, are you a project manager or a task leader, et cetera, as well. So I'm going to go through 6 elements of your corporate communication strategy. We're going to talk through these different areas and make sure that we can go through how you can learn and grow a lot of the pieces that you have. First off, aligning your communications with your business goals and priorities. That sounds so obvious, doesn't it? And yet, how many things and people inside of your company right now, and maybe a show of hands if you're willing, nobody's recording this from a hand-raising perspective, how much noise do you have in your mailbox right now? Like, how many messages are out there, you're like, that's just all this stuff I have to get through. But all those communications are being lovingly crafted by somebody, right? And so they sent it out, and they're like hope and spirit and pray out there of like, yes, I sent my communication, maybe somebody will look at it. And then as a recipient, you look at it and you're like, oh, this is just another thing I have to get by, right? I have to get by this. I have to get rid of this, get rid of it, delete it out of my mailbox, right? And so we want to think about what are those business goals and priorities in the company, and how are we helping to make sure our communications are truly aligned with that. And of course, we've got some data that helps with this too, right? The data here that tells us, right, most things that communications are the most important and critical skill to have, and yet, we don't have things that line up with that. Let's set a goal about what your campaign, your communications that you're going out with. Make sure that those actually have relevance and impact metrics that are associated with what you need to drive in your company. And that sounds really obvious, right? It sounds very obvious to me to say it, but it's so important. And so we're going to talk through a little bit about how to do that too. Now, second piece of this, I want to make sure that you're actually streaming those workflows. And again, this is one where we think about the digital flows that are happening in your organization. Corporate communications has gone through a radical transformation in the last 10 years. Remember, folks used to be able to pin things up in the office. People would put stuff in odd places, in the elevators and in the bathrooms and anywhere that they could actually reach their employees, right? And now we've gone through this hybrid workforce, right? We're looking at people who are all over the globe. We've got people who don't even come into the office at all. And then we want to make sure that we're actually helping to align those communications to wherever they are. And so we want to think about how we can streamline those communications. So first off, campaigns, I'm going to use the word campaign. Campaign is a loose structure in this case of here's a set of communications with goals and priorities that I want to put together. And within that campaign, I'm going to be able to set what I need from each of those communications. I want to make sure which channels I'm going to use to communicate those messages out. Maybe I'm going to send something out that's all of these different communication channels to get started, but then I'm going to continue on and say, hey, I'm going to look at how effective each of these communications has been from this area, and then make sure that we're actually emphasizing some of those critical groups here too. So when we look at audiences, when we look at understanding how people are changing and how they're consuming that information, I want you to morph back inside of your campaign and your communications to make sure that they're aligned with those preferences going forward. Let's build a network of people who are internal champions and influencers who are helping you to amplify your message. Why would I do this, right? This is my job. My job is to do corporate communications, or I'm a business manager, or I'm in IT, and I've got to scale out these communications. Why do I need these influencers, right? This is something we have from our social constructs outside, right? If you're TikTok or YouTube or Instagram or wherever you happen to look at, you're thinking about social influence side of the company. But oftentimes we use that as signal as humans, right, to make sure that we're actually going through the messages that are most important to us. And so when we see amplification from people we recognize or people we admire inside of the company, we want to make sure that those messages are being read and understood. And that helps us as communicators to make sure that we're approaching the right set of people. So I've put together here a list of how you can actually determine who are those internal influencers inside of your company. And so, of course, we've got technologies like Viva Engage that can help you with communities, but how do I even understand a little bit about those internal influencers too? So first off, I got a couple of things, right? There's quantitative approaches on here, as well as making sure that we've got those organizational dynamics. And so depending on your company culture, one or more of these methods may actually lean more towards what you need. So if you're a company right now and you're still in the midst of your digital transformation and you're trying to work with all of these new technologies, oftentimes organizational approaches might fit the better for you. Those organizational approaches are things like, making sure you're consulting with these different managers, you're making sure that you've got project leaders as part of this too. But then we've got these more quantitative methods too that help us to understand a little bit about, what are those networks inside of the company that are already working? How can we figure out who the right engagement metrics are, or what the right engagement metrics are, so we can actually understand a little bit more about this too. Once we have this group of influencers, that helps us to amplify out our communications and make sure that we're able to reach everybody that we need. Now, a couple other areas to go through. Fostering a culture of feedback and learning that helps you improve. Again, this is something where I think this is such an important discipline inside of communications right now. This is one area where we want to make sure that we're taking in the feedback from these processes. Part of the reason we all feel overwhelmed by the amount of mail and everything else, those communications that we're getting inside of our mailbox, is because folks are not listening and learning from the signals that are happening with there. So whether it's through consumption as part of that, maybe it's understanding a little bit more about all of these different areas that are happening inside of your company. But we also got some great data here that helps to make sure that that kind of two-way dialogue is happening. And so this is one where managers and employees, especially if you're on the business side here, you're thinking through, like, how am I communicating with my employees? How am I making sure that I'm able to cover all of the different perspectives and recognize all of these different areas? And then thinking through, like, how do I process that two-way dialogue? So when I send the communications out, am I actually starting a conversation with people? right? Am I starting a conversation with my folks? Do I want responses from there? Am I listening to how people are consuming that information and then making sure that we're a part of those areas too? All right, develop a distinctive and compelling voice. Do you feel like you have a voice in your communications? Just curious. You feel like you have a voice, some tonality, 3 or 4 people over here. Anybody else think they have a strong voice in their communications? Interesting. Okay. All right. A few folks in the audience. So that's a really interesting one to think about. When you're crafting these communications, are we thinking about the voice, that your tone that you're sending out here? Is it consistent across the communications that you're sending? This is where the content really comes to the fore, right? We need to make sure that we have a voice that feels like, hey, this is how I'm engaging my employees. This is how I'm talking to people. This is how I'm going to nurture them through either communications or whether I need to take action. And are we using the same calls to action as part of that too? Because those calls to action are really based on what should I be doing with this information. And so I put on this survey here. It's a really helpful survey by the Edelman folks that helps us to see like how people look at how they rate sources credibly inside of your organization. And so you can see here, I've got kind of external voices, internal voices. The blue boxes help with what company voices are. And so if you've been looking at internal communications for a while, you might realize that many of those things are now becoming employee advocacy tools as well. So you take stuff that's out on your intranet and you repost it on LinkedIn, right? Because you're like, this is part of the employee experience. I want to make sure that the people that I'm engaging with every single day are also being great brand ambassadors for my organization. Folks doing that already? You're taking content that's on your intranet, I'm just curious, and then posting it, reposting it basically onto LinkedIn or other places. Yeah, so a few folks as well. Okay, good to know. So I want to see like that brand ambassador piece of it. How do I make sure that my employees are exemplifying what I want to do with the culture that I have inside of the company and taking that message out? And so we can do a few things here, right? One is to have that group of influencers inside of the company to help you to craft what that voice looks like. How do people respond to how you're crafting the communications to make sure that they have the language that you feel good about and that you have a voice that you can then help scale across your communications too? And this becomes really important when we bring it down into the tool set. When we bring it to the tool set, we want to make sure that we're using language, we have a standardized set of language that people feel comfortable with, that they understand when they should be taking action, right? How they're actually using that to impress people to take the actions that we need in the company. And we'll bring that down into the tools in a second. All right, the 6th one, collaboration. Yay! This is what communications is really all about, right? Because what is a communication? What is that message in the end? It's really an expression of collaboration. You are asking for something when you send out a communication. You're asking for an action or for people to have taken notice or to be informed in some way. And so you've got lots of collaboration to do, but there's lots of collaboration to do inside of the organization as well. Now, thinking through, who are the people in your communications collaboration network? And so if you're in internal communications, all of these folks are your partners, right? So I want to think about how you engage all of these people in the different communications that you're sending out, whether they're customers for you. If you internally, you might think about them as customers that way, but you can also think about them as partners, both to help amplify what you're doing, as well as making sure that you're addressing a lot of these needs too. All right, so that's the 6 kind of ways that I have to help you with your corporate strategy, communications strategy on this. And then I wanted to go through a couple of big considerations, and then we'll talk about the tools and how we can use those more effectively. So first off, the hybrid work piece. I wanted to just reset a little bit on sort of the ground truth, if you will, of what's going on inside of communications. Because first off, the understanding those hybrid work strategies, we mentioned it quickly before, but how we reach people inside of the organization has radically shifted. It seems, again, very simple and obvious. We've all been part of that shift. We were all part of the pandemic. We understand that now we've done remote work on a global scale, and we've proved that that social experiment could actually happen, right? And so now we can say, yes, this is a different way. But we have still people that are in first-line worker roles, right? They're out in manufacturing facilities, they're out in different plants, et cetera. They're working in these, or they're in retail, et cetera. So being able to make sure that those folks are also getting that communication in the way that they need. But you as a leader, as a communicator, it's really hard to reach people in this hybrid work role, right? They're looking around, they've got a noisy environment at home to start off with if they're working from home, or if they just feel remote from the corporate office, if you will, right? They feel that disconnection. And so we want to make sure that we're actually, making things that are actually more effective and looking at how we can tailor those messages appropriately too. Now, digital transformation, that's the other big one. Who has been asked to send out communications about, hey, there's this new tool, you need to upskill, you need to do this. Okay, lots of folks on that one, all right. So this is a big part of it, right? Our communications messages have fundamentally changed. Not only do you have to read the message, you have to take action, and then you have to encourage people to actually upskill, right? This is a big thing. It's like a lot of folks are like, no, I already went to school for that. Didn't I stop doing my learning, right? Do I have to go learn some new tool now or new thing, or why are we changing this process from the thing that I already know? And the thing is that even when change is good, it's hard, right? It is hard to communicate about change. And so we want to think about those digital transformation moments. What are you doing with that workplace to make sure that people are engaged as well? And so when we're looking at digital literacy, we have to look at all of the different ways that we can communicate with folks, whether it's, again, through the Teams piece, through the Outlook, through Engage, etc. We have to look at all of those communication messages and make sure that we're tailoring appropriately for that. So this is a great one where videos and snippets, right, making sure that people are consuming the information in the way that we think that they will. So lots of goodness there. And then well-being and mental health. Sometimes I put this up on the slide and people are like, well, I don't do mental health. I don't want to think about that, right? But we all know we're under stress, right? We just acknowledge it. We just say, hey, we're under stress. We know that folks' well-being is very important to how we think about employee engagement inside of the company. And so oftentimes demonstrating how we care is a good place to be. And so this is one where, depending on the corporate culture of your organization, you may never say anything about mental health, and then other folks may be a different path of, okay, I can actually acknowledge it. But this is one where understanding that people take that information in different ways and in different times. And so we want to make sure that we're tailoring our message appropriately there too. Then inclusivity, this is another big one for us. So thinking through, like, are your communications accessible, right? We've got lots of stuff in tooling that can help to automate this process too, but I'd also encourage you to think about not just folks with, known and seen disabilities, but also thinking about how we can make this even more inclusive. Like, are you working with neurodiverse people, for example? How are we helping them to tailor their communications and understand how effective they are too? And then lastly, we've got these other understanding around data. I'm going to hammer on about data a lot because data is my favorite. As a communications, data is my favorite, right? And so we want to understand how people are actually reading and consuming the things that we put together, and so we can take action. All of that is not to be like, hey, I sent out this email and 3,500 people looked at it, right? That's 3,500 people who were engaged. How many people were not engaged? How did they react? Were there gestures? Could I feel like those gestures were not just, token likes, right? How do I think about actually engaging them differently? And so those are a couple of different areas. All right, so I've gone through all of that piece. Are we making sense so far? Yes, tracking so far, all good, yes, all right. A mini round of applause, thank you, Perla, and thank you, folks, appreciate it. So I'm gonna hand it over now. We're gonna talk more about tools and apps, which I know that you're all here for, because it's the Microsoft 365 Collaboration Conference, so of course you're here to talk about tools and apps. But we're gonna bring it down and ground it into these different scenarios, so hopefully that helps as well. So I'm gonna hand it over to Manika, and she's gonna talk a little bit about Viva Amplify. Yay, go Manika.
Thank you, Naomi, for doing such a wonderful job framing those challenges. So I think you're all aware that, this can be a tricky landscape. There is a strategy to drive for sure. And we at Microsoft, we're aware of that. It's our job as product managers, product builders, innovators to provide you with the tools to make sure that you can drive that communication strategy. And one of those tools is Viva Amplify. As I mentioned at the beginning, my name is Manika. I'm a product manager on Viva Amplify. And I'll be talking about the potential you can unlock here, how you can drive your strategy using Viva Amplify. And we're going to start super high level here. We all know Microsoft's mission by now. Hopefully, we are empowering every organization and individual to achieve more. And Amplify, we align with that mission. And we're doing that as a product by empowering leaders and communicators to elevate their message, energize their people, and really importantly, meeting people where they are. And we do this with 3 key pillars in our product. We are helping you communicate easier. We are helping you to communicate better. We'll get into that, talking about writing guidance, the campaign goals, and we are helping you be heard, drive engagement. There's so much amazing reporting functionality you've probably begun to see. So we'll be getting into these 3 pillars in just a second here, how they help you drive all those strategy tips and tools that Naomi just talked about. But first, let's look at some common Amplify use cases. We've already started to mention just a couple of these as Naomi was talking about the challenges. These probably look really familiar to you, maybe somewhat obvious, starting with newsletters. Of course, you have product launches. There's a fun one there, change management. Anyone deploying Copilot? If so, quick plug, come to our session on Copilot and Viva at the end of the day, because boy, do we have something exciting for you. Hope to see you there. Trip reports. We're all here in Orlando together in a few days. You'll probably want to recap this, tell everyone what you saw, what you did. So Amplify can help you with that. Project updates, anything HR related, whether it's open enrollment, leadership changes. I could go on and on. I'll talk a little bit about my own personal use case. I probably fall into the category of a creator here at Microsoft. At Microsoft, we do like to use the tools that we build. And so I do use Viva Amplify, shocking, I know. But as a product manager, we like to write up, little feature status report updates, sending them out to engineering, to Naomi, my manager, to other people, so they know that I'm actually doing something. But every few weeks or so, gosh, it takes a while to get all those status updates, to pull some data, put it into a Word document. I'm formatting it there, putting that into an email. Then I'm putting that into a news post. Then I send it out and I'm like, crickets, did anyone even get this? And so that is no longer a concern with Viva Amplify. I have a campaign for the features that I work on. I can generate a publication every few weeks or so and see the engagement on that too. So that's just my own use case so that we actually use our products too. Let's look at just Viva Amplify all together. We're elevating your message with centralized communications. And this photo here is kind of a view within a campaign, as Naomi talked about, these publications that have this common goal, this common message behind them. And so using Amplify, you can manage, publish, and elevate campaigns all in one place right here. And we guide communicators to write messages that stick. We'll get into that with communicating better in just a second. Driving engagement with reporting, measuring the effectiveness so that you know how you were successful once and then can make sure that you repeat that so that all of your communications following continue to have that same success. And yes, we are generally available. You can use this today. And then we're just, constantly shipping some really exciting features into product that, in this session, we won't get too much into the new features, but there is one tomorrow morning where we'll be diving into that. So definitely Naomi and Mike Holsey will be talking about that tomorrow morning. So do come to that if you're interested. All right, let's look at those 3 pillars that I mentioned, starting with communicating easier. So as I mentioned, central place to create, manage, publish, and evaluate campaigns all in one place. Multiple campaigns, we saw people raising hands for multiple different things of I'm sending out this, I have this. Naomi talked about feels like our scopes are just always growing. So you might have multiple campaigns you need to manage. You can do that here. And then we separate message writing and distribution channels because you just need to create this out once. Like I mentioned, I don't have to waste that time putting this into a Word document and then into a SharePoint page or anything like that. You're just doing it once. And then if you need to track reviewers, get that approval, you can do that all here within Amplify. And this is built on top of SharePoint. So everything, permissions, content management, that is all built in. Use those features with confidence as well. So that is how we help you communicate easier with Amplify. Let's look at communicate better. This is really exciting because as we talked about, campaigns, they are centered around that common goal. We have something called the campaign brief or the objectives where you're writing out that intentionality of this is the message that I want to drive. Or maybe if you're a group of communicators working on something together, or if you're doing this for a stakeholder, you want to ensure that what you're actually sending out resonates with that message, right? And so it's easy. We're busy. It's easy to, as we're writing, maybe get a little lost. But Amplify helps you communicate better by pulling you back into those
quality messages that resonate and that stick to those goals and that campaign brief that you've set. So we have writing guidance that will align directly to the campaign brief and objectives that you've set to ensure that your message really drives that home and drives that through with your communication. So that is one thing that, you're, wherever else you might be drafting, that this is unique to Amplify and really, really cool. And ensuring that you're sending out the highest quality message, aligning to your stakeholders and other people that you're collaborating with. And then goals. As I mentioned, I send out something and I'm like, did anyone get this? I'm sure we've all thought to ourselves, wouldn't it be nice if at least, 50 people read my email or something like that? And so instead of just thinking that, you can set these goals now with our campaign goals feature and see that engagement come through, track as you get to that goal. And then of course that brings us to reporting, which we'll get to in a second here. But we want to make sure that within Amplify, you are able to measure your success and work towards those goals. So being heard, driving engagement, measuring that success. This is that exciting reporting that we started to show you a little bit in the keynote yesterday. And so you see this aggregate reporting across campaigns, across publications, and you can do it all within one dashboard here in Amplify. No need to, waste a little bit of time going in between Teams and SharePoint and Outlook to get all this information. It is all here in your campaign. You can separate it down by the publication. You can break it down even further by that distribution channel, understand that sentiment as well. And then another really exciting point here is you can overlay your HR and your org data. So take this even a step further and put that org data in there. You can see, okay, it looks like a lot of people from Jeff's organization actually interacted with this message, but maybe not so much from this other organization. That's even more valuable insights for you to drive into, figure out why, and improve your communication. So we provide you this information so that you know what's working and that you also know how to improve it, so that you can replicate success. So that is being heard with Viva Amplify. As I mentioned, there are so many features that I could talk about. We have Copilot in Viva later today. We have Naomi's session tomorrow morning. But there is one feature that I will highlight today that we are rolling out pretty soon here. This is targeting audiences with Viva Amplify. And this is just a little clip. This is super fresh because, as you can see, this is M365 Conference 2024 Day 1 recap. So totally did not just grab this last night as Adam was sending this out. But that's because I was really dedicated to making sure I was bringing you the freshest thing possible. But you can see on this side here, as I'm helping Adam select SharePoint sites, there's also now the option for audience targeting. Optional, but that just aligns to the SharePoint concept of audience targeting, that within those sites, if I choose that audience, they will see this communication in that news section of their site. So really exciting to be releasing that. And I think that's a good feature to highlight because it's a SharePoint concept. That is a great segue into SharePoint news with Dave. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, Manika. Before I get started, it's early, y'all are quiet. Did anyone have any questions on Viva Amplify before we move on to SharePoint news? Just to spice it up a little bit. Anything you wanted clarified or? Okay, we got one. We'll take one.
I was just wondering if it's everything's available for GCC, if there's any differences with that kind of information.
I think the question was GCC. I didn't hear all of it. So the question was Viva Amplify availability in GCC. So we are actually working on it right now. And so those are big areas for us. We're also waiting for our Engage colleagues to be able to be available in GCC as well. And so that I'm looking forward to, I think towards the end of the calendar year is realistic for GCC availability. Thank you. Good question. Oh, another quick question.
Right now we have cardiolog analytics. Would you say that Amplify provides the same sort of analytics, that it gets really granular into we can see like our employee groups and
So a couple things here. So on the analytics front, so as Manika mentioned, there is a service in there to actually map in your organizational data. You can do that in lots of different places. So with that, you can overlay the HR system data, or you can use your Entra data. So if you use Azure, it's previously called Azure Active Directory. So if you use that, if you use Entra, you can see all your organizational breakdowns from there. So we do this actually inside of Microsoft, so we can see things of like, hey, this is, my team in Vancouver have consumed this information. I can see it's anonymized up to, or sorry, not anonymized, aggregated up to like at least 5 people in a specific category, if you will, so that we're not being overly granular. So if I'm picking on Manica because she's in the Bay Area, I can't see that only Manica didn't read the communication, for example, but I need to see at least 5 folks in that particular group to make that happen. So yeah, it's a really great way to be able to slice and dice all of that information too, right? And then be able to see that both from your organizational layers as well as understanding like where people are looking from a breakdown perspective. So you can see like, oh, are most people consuming it through Outlook, or are they consuming it through Teams? And then I can overlay like, this is, you know, the folks in Vancouver read mail, but the folks in Noida read Teams messages, right? So that's right. Yeah, goodness, lots of goodness there. All right, go for it.
Thank you. If you have other questions about Viva Amplify, remember them for about 10 minutes. We'll leave some questions, some time for questions at the end. But you know, write it down if you're worried about forgetting it. So SharePoint News. Quick show of hands, how many people use SharePoint News? Okay, a lot. How many people could describe SharePoint News in 5 minutes really clearly to anyone in their organization? Okay. Some fewer hands. And I saw earlier we had a good segment of corporate communicators in here and also IT, right? Like raise your hand if you're one of those 2. Okay, that is the nexus of unlocking SharePoint News, right? Corporate communications, you need people to get to be communicating in a way that's more durable and findable than email. Right? And in IT, you need to provide the tooling for people to be able to do that. So SharePoint News, it's just a web content authoring and distribution tool for your intranet. It's built on SharePoint Pages, so it's familiar, it's easy, it's approachable. If you know how to author a SharePoint page, you can write a news post. It makes it easy to distribute your content. That's really the differentiating factor between pages and news posts. Right? A news post is a page that the system understands and it sends it out automatically to different aggregators, right? Those aggregators might be news feeds throughout SharePoint, they might be in Viva Connections, they might be roll-ups on specific web parts. It's really a metadata indicator on a page, and the system will take care of distributing it. And news posts have built-in analytics, not as extensive as Viva Amplify, but some base layer analytics to help you understand how your content is being viewed, trend lines over time, dwell time, and it has built-in commenting so that you can engage your audience and have a dialogue with them and get some social signals like likes. So common SharePoint News use cases. This is intentionally similar to the slide that you saw for Viva Amplify. There is absolutely overlap between the two. But what you'll notice is that we started at the top of the intranet, so to speak, in terms of communication needs, right? Viva Amplify is really a tool targeted at communicators' needs, whereas SharePoint News it comes down the stack a little bit and is a democratized tool that anyone in the intranet should be able to use, right? So you might have newsletters as well, but you'll also have things like how-to information. If an engineer comes up with a new process for doing something more efficiently, you don't want that trapped in email. You want that written down in a SharePoint page where it's archived somewhere that you can find and anyone in the internet can utilize. But it's also distributed in the moment, right? Because it's temporally relevant. It's relevant right now. And so you'll see that a lot of the use cases for SharePoint News are moving communications out of email into a more durable form factor. So where is news shown? News is distributed to some key out-of-the-box experiences throughout the intranet. The SharePoint start page, it has a news feed just for you, the person viewing it, that aggregates news from the sites that you work in, news from the people that you work with, news from your organization. So if someone in your org hierarchy above you publishes a news post, it will understand that and it will bring it to you. It shows you news from sites that you have access to that people you work with go to those sites. And so it's bringing all this content to you. It wants to show you what's happening around your intranet. If you have a team site or a communication site, and the news web part is an automatic roll-up of SharePoint news posts. And then you have hub sites. Hub sites are, we now have a hub and spoke model of intranet IA, different than subsites previously that was very hierarchical. Hub sites will roll up the news from all the sites connected to them, and you can configure the news web part on a hub site to show you the news posts from all the sites, associated sites connected to that hub. Viva Connections has an aggregated news feed. News posts will show up there and on the mobile app as well. And then email news digests. You can, on any site, go to the news web part, click See All, and configure a digest to help people see the news that they may have missed. It's a way of really driving engagement in that content. And now, most importantly, this is, I think, certainly in the way we use news internally, news in Outlook has been just a sea change in the SharePoint News feature. You know, we use SharePoint News extensively in the OneDrive and SharePoint team. We really do dog food our own tools. We live them, we breathe them. And last summer, when we built that feature, the usage of it skyrocketed. I don't think there was any feature that we built previously that got such instant usage in our own day-to-day work. Authoring news posts and then sending them via email took content that would normally be either trapped in email, most likely, right, and then lost over time. And it made it durable. It put it on SharePoint site, but people could get it in their inboxes and see it in its full fidelity. There was no see a preview of it and click and go read it on the web. You could read it right in your inbox. You can see it right in the flow of work. And you'll see a little demo of that later when we get into it. What is an organization news site? People, hands up, familiar with organization news sites? So all the places that I said where news shows up, it can be a flood of information. If you make that cultural shift to using SharePoint News, now you need a way of having the most important news rise to the top, right? So an organization news site is a designation for an important site on your intranet that's meant to be an authoritative news source. When news posts from that site are shown in these aggregated feeds, what we'll do is we'll give it a special visual notation of the site name and say, this is from a special site in your organization. We'll call it out. We'll make sure that it has a very special badging on it. So the people viewing it can see that, hey, this is different than this other news post. This is not a trip report from my peer. This is HR saying, hey, it's open enrollment. So there are different types of communication that we want to make sure that are elevated to the top, and designating a site as an organization news site is one of the best ways to do that. And if you're using home sites in Viva Connections, that home site is automatically an organization news site. We think that the home site in almost every case is an authoritative place of news content. All right, so news in Outlook. You need to reach people where they are. How many people live and breathe in Outlook still? Right? If the content doesn't get to people where they're working, it's very hard to pull them out of that to get them to go look at it someplace else. So we want to make sure the content on the intranet can go to people where they are to help your communications reach people where they're working. So news in Outlook is a feature that takes a SharePoint page, a news post, and it sends it via email, and it renders it completely in the email client. This doesn't just work in OWA. This works in the Win32 Outlook client, and it looks great. So we also shipped 6 new news post templates designed specifically so that as you are just filling in your content, those pages look fantastic in an email client, right? With a narrow viewport, they reflow beautifully. And so it's really easy to get started with those templates. And then the analytics on those news posts, we actually capture those views when they're read in email. And so you're not losing anything on the analytics side. Like, we will still be able to tell you how many people are interacting with it. Here's just a quick look at those templates. They're gorgeous. I want to, so John, our director of engineering, is in the back. We have software engineers, right? sending out news posts that look gorgeous, right? Like, but that's a really key thing. It is easy for them to make professional-looking communications, and they do it all the time now, right? This feature was an incredible change in the way that we work, right? The communications that anyone in the organization can send out are beautiful and engaging. All right, so next I want to talk about video pages. So we also worked on a set of new news post pages where the new Stream web part is embedded. So the new Stream web part is a brand new web part that we launched just last year. It's the best of Stream embedded in pages and news posts. You get the new Stream player, and it allows you, the video pages allow you to create video pages directly from the Stream video itself. So there's an entry point just from Stream. You can also create these through the template picker when you click on new page or new news post. And coolest thing of all, as this video plays, when you create a video page as a news post, you author it and you send it out via email. Not only is the news post rendered completely in email, the video will play in line in the email client. So people really don't have to go anywhere to see your content, right? That content goes to them wherever they're working. And you'll see that in just a second in this video. This is a live code video, by the way. Like, this is working. All right, so tips and some best practices. SharePoint News is really designed to be a democratized news creation tool in your intranet. It's meant to be used by anyone. If you don't give people access to create content in their sites, they can't create SharePoint News posts, right? So you have to empower those creators. You have to give them the ability to go and create that content. Culture matters. We saw this internally in our own team. Change is hard, right? You have to encourage people to get out of email and start authoring things in a place where the content will be URL addressable, it will be durable, it can be searched for by anyone in the intranet. And that is a culture change. And luckily, we have a great tool in Viva Amplify to go and run campaigns on how to communicate differently. Pinning and filtering of the news content in the news web part is really great. Once you do have that corpus of content, you have a lot of news posts that you need to help people refine to get the content that matters to them. We have those tools to make sure that those web parts can show the content that you want it to show through filtering or selecting different sites only. The News Digest is a really great way of driving content. You can choose what articles to send out to people to re-engage with. And just like in Amplify, you can target your content with audience targeting. Audience targeting is a way of adding metadata to a news post that is modern groups. And when that news post comes into a news web part or to an aggregated feed, if the viewer is not in the modern group that's been tagged for that news post, they're not going to see it. It filters it out. And so it's a way of really refining the content that people see as it gets produced in the intranet. The last tip I want to get to, and this is really a tool for top-down communications, is Boost. So Boost is a way of taking a news post and saying, I want this to show up in my aggregated feed, so in the SharePoint Start, and the SharePoint App Bar, and Viva Connections. I want a news post to stay at the top of that feed for up to 4 days, right? I don't want new content to push it down the stack because it's just really, really important. So if you have a campaign that you need to make sure that people see, it's open enrollment season or something. Or there's a raffle going on for a limited time, and so you really want to make sure that that content doesn't age out very quickly because so much content is being produced. Well done on that culture change, having so much content being produced. Boost lets you kind of dictate in those aggregated feeds what stays at the top. And so when boosted news is there, you'll see a little icon saying, yep, this has been boosted. Again, another signal to the viewers that this is an important piece of content and that they should pay attention to it. So with that, I'm going to hand it back over to Naomi, and I think we'll reserve some time for questions. All right, thank you.
Yay, thanks, Dave. Good stuff. Awesome. All right, so I wanted to wrap up with a few final thoughts here, a little bit future-facing, if that's okay. Yes? All right, good. I wanted to talk through a few things here about how the communicators' work will change and yet not change. So one of the reports I wanted to draw your attention to, if you are interested to think about what the future of collaboration looks like, and you all should be because you're sitting here at this conference, I would definitely recommend this, something we call the New Future of Work report. It comes out from our Microsoft research colleagues, and it's an amazing digest of like what we're seeing, how we're thinking about artificial intelligence models, what kind of collaboration trends are part of this one too. But one of the things that's interesting to think about how our role evolves as we go into this new generative AI space and how the world is going to change dramatically. We can think about here, you can see the top headline, analyzing and integrating becomes more important skills than searching and creating. So you think about this as a communicator, right? And we're all communicators creations, right? We're all doing the creator process ourselves. And when we think about aggregating, are we actually going to look at how AI is going to partner with us to help create those communications? Monica referenced earlier, right? She's going to put together and aggregate all these status reports. You might have seen in the keynote yesterday, we talked about, how do I write a new communication and easily use, all the great capabilities we have inside of news and pages to make it look beautiful. I can think about AI as kind of being my companion, right? It's basically the companion that's helping me to craft this. And so from my own skill set, and you all as the communicators, your own skill set there will morph around, more about the tone, the language, the messages that you're trying to express, and then thinking about yourselves more as an editor than an actual author at the beginning, right? Taking that first draft. Maybe you'll have AI do that for you. And so how do we think about analyzing and putting those pieces together and integrating that? And one of the reasons I mentioned earlier is like all of those different partners that we have. Remember I had that thing around Comms Collab Network, and we've got folks in IT, we've got facilities, we've got all of these different people that we need to partner with across our organization, and thinking about how we integrate a lot of those messages into the communications that we send. Because the goal is to send less communications that are more effective, right? And so we have to think about all the time we're spending and how we're using AI to craft that message so we can send less things that are more effective and reach the people that we need. Now, another area I wanted to talk about is kind of durable communications. So Dave brought up a lot of what we're doing with SharePoint News. And of course, you want things to be consumed on your intranet. But one of the trends you might notice is as we're sending communications out to meet people wherever they are, we're sending them out in Outlook and in Teams and Engage and in SharePoint and wherever you choose to consume that information. And that might lead you to look at your stats and say, hey, those stats say that my intranet, nobody's looking at my sites because they're all reading their news through email, right, or wherever they choose to do that. And you're like, well, why do I even post this to the intranet, right? Why would that even have a benefit for me? And so I wanted to make sure here that you understand, right, that future of what you do with your intranet and keeping a durable copy of those communications. And so this, of course, will be a grounding source for Copilot. Right? So think about your intranet as being a grounding source there and making sure that you have a copy of those communications going out. It's not just about retiring this communication quickly and it's not fresh anymore. We want to make sure that we're using it as part of this too. And the reason to do that is oftentimes we can do interactive questions and answers on top of all of this content, right? So you want to be able to ask as an employee, people will want to go ask about those communications. What happened? When did it happen? What was the timeline of things changing over time, right? Having durable copies of those communications will be incredibly important too. And then as Dave mentioned a little bit around that verification of the source of that information. So if you have this posted in your organizational news, right, you've made sure that you're actually keeping a copy of this and you're actually helping to verify where this information came from. Because remember, when you're contributing and you're looking at this stuff inside of Copilot and you're consuming lots of information, it's really hard to figure out where it all came from, right? And so we want to make sure that our employees are getting the best and freshest information there too. So I want to encourage you to think about AI as both an audience right? Your AI is actually an audience of the communications that you're sending out. You should think about it just the same way as you think about groups of people in your company, as well as being an awesome amplifier of those communications. Make sense? Yes? Good. All right, just checking, because it seems like it maybe seems obvious, but at the same time, it's hard to think about AI as an audience. But when people are looking at Copilot, they're asking questions of Copilot, I want to make sure all of my communications are actually coming from the source that's important. All right, last thing I want to mention here is, of course, the communications, they demonstrate what your corporate culture is. As we always think about, we're talking about communication strategy in this session. Of course, culture eats strategy for breakfast, as Peter Drucker famously said. And so every time you send out a communication, it is a demonstration of what your culture values. And so I encourage you to think about the tone, the voice, the way that you're communicating, how you're interacting with people in that engagement here as an expression of the culture of your org. So what culture do you want to project in your communications is oftentimes how people will help to consume it. All right, with that, I will leave us a couple of minutes for questions, but I wanted to put out some resources here as well. There's the SharePoint lookbook, we've got the toolkits here, a bunch of things on how to adopt Viva Amplify, and I definitely want to thank you so very much for your attention. So thank you, you've been amazing, and I appreciate you coming out this morning. Thank you. Yeah.
Sort of three minor questions.
Yeah.
News posts. Have you guys ever thought about separating those out from the site pages library? And then with the email function, will we ever get the ability to send from a shared mailbox from that space?
We've heard the feedback on the shared mailbox piece and sending them from a group, so top of mind, we're thinking about it. The first piece, can you just tell me why you want to separate news posts out from pages?
Content, people who are posting news on their sites. I know there's the promoted state, which you can't really change, and there's ways to filter it, but that's a little more technical than for the authors that are posting the content. And so separating it out, having a separate space where they can see a news posts folder and then any news that they're sharing, because they'll sometimes develop pages that are specific to like ongoing work that they update from year to year for campaigns or things like that. So there's one link that they can send out.
So really content management.
Really messy.
Got it. Totally get it. We're not really planning anything there, but that's really good feedback. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Thank you.
You mentioned something about Outlook analytics. How is that different? And so I heard somebody ask about Cardiolog analytics, which were getting implemented in July. So I just want to understand the difference with Outlook analytics. Does it drill down to specifics like location, personas, or is it just basic, how many people read the email?
Yeah. So there's a couple of different levels to that, right? One is what we have in news, right? So as Dave mentioned, if you consume that news through Outlook, you'll see some information there that helps you to make sure that you have read folks, that you can see that people have read that message through Outlook as well as through SharePoint, et cetera. Now in Amplify, which is what I was talking about earlier with this lady in terms of understanding the analytics piece of it, it's even more supercharged, right? So you can take in organizational data there. So all of that stuff I mentioned about, how your org is connected, the geographies that people are in, the distribution lists that you're sending it to. There you can see that inside of Amplify. You can see how people are reacting to all of those messages across Outlook, SharePoint, Engage, and Teams. And you can see that holistically for that communication. So you can drill down by department, you can drill down by distribution group, how they read the message, and then if you have that geography function as part of your organizational data, so it could be your HR system, or it could be Entra, right, that does that, we can use all of that to basically pivot those reports on.
Quick question, you mentioned the email templates that are ready made or already built. Am I able to create my own branded templates?
Yes, you can create your own. News in Outlook feature, there are specific web parts that will work for that. And we make sure that in those templates, we use those web parts. Most of our web parts will be able to be rendered fully in Outlook, but an example is like Power BI, for example. We can't do that yet. And so what will happen is that will revert back to the behavior that you might be used to, where it sends a little snippet preview of the page in a news post. But we'll also tell you at the top of the news post when you've added a web part to a news post that can't be fully rendered in email. We'll let you know that that's the case and which web part it is. So as you're building your template, you'll have the information you need to set your expectations correctly.
We have a 30,000 employee organization. We got throttled because of org-wide teams. We were not able to do it because there are 10,000 limits of creating a communication for org-wide. And then we had to use Viva Engage. And that came out to be a spammer for us. All of those notifications. So now, should we use Viva Engage or Viva Amplify?
So it depends on the message you're trying to send. So that's the big thing. So Engage is amazing for our communities and having that two-way dialogue, right? So if that's the thing that is super important, I would recommend to have that social community or campaign that's going on there too. If you're sending things out that are more like these communications you want to push and then ask for engagement, right? That's where Amplify is exemplifying that, because you're helping to use both your intranet, your news pages, basically. You can send it out on Teams if people choose to consume. A lot of people are consuming information from Teams as well, and then making sure that folks can able to basically read it wherever they want to, right? And so there's that piece of it. So when you're looking at org-wide communications, you have choices, right, around this, and depends on the content and what kind of engagement you're trying to primarily stimulate from your audience. So if you want to create community, you want to have lots of conversation, then Engage is the best place to do that. But there are people who are not on Engage because they choose not to look at it or whatever, right? But so you might want to say, hey, I'm going to send a Teams message, I'm going to send you a news post, point you to this community, all of that goodness. But if it's primarily like, you need to click on this button and take this action, right, then that's a different set of communications and the message that you want there too. So hopefully that helps.
For Viva Amplify, right?
Yeah, so Amplify does all of these things, right? So it lets you choose those communication mechanisms as part of that too. But I would, I encourage, like, what's the predominant action you want the recipient to take, right? To think about like where your choices are. And so, yeah.
And is there any special license requirement?
There is. So Viva Amplify is a premium product. It's part of Viva, and so it is part of the communications and communities area as well as the Viva suite. So, yeah.
It's expensive.
Yeah. It's not expensive. It's not that expensive. So I think for what it does, it's a lot cheaper than a lot of our analytics vendors. So all good.
What's the roadmap look like for continued development of the templates that are currently available? You mentioned that there are 6 new ones. Is there going to continue to be development of the news posts so that you can do more and have more and more flexibility in terms of the layouts that you create?
It's not on the roadmap because this is early, right? So I'm just sharing top of mind. Have you used Canva? Right? So Canva does a great job of giving you an almost unlimited number of templates to suit your need. I would say that we have the same ambition when it comes to creating pages and news posts and campaigns in Amplify. So super early. Like I'm not committing to anything right now, but that's where we're thinking, right? We know that templates are the most effective way of getting people started and producing great content, and we're gonna go pretty big there.
Yeah. You might have seen yesterday in the keynote, we covered off on some of the Copilot directions there, right? So where we showed like, hey, I'm prompting this and Copilot is helping me to create that. So some of it is like, do I really need templates or do I just need an assistant that's helping me to build the content for me? Thank you so much for all your questions. I appreciate it. Thank you.